Hi there. Welcome back, I suppose, to Perspectives YYC. In this episode, I sit down with Alex Kwong, who is our good-looking, sexy-voiced painter. I learned a lot about both his fine art studying, and we wax philosophical about the art scene in Calgary, about public commercial art, about a lot of interesting stuff. I hope that you enjoy listening to his incredible dulcet tones as much as we did recording it. A quick thank you to Handmade, a local band here who's just released their debut EP called For You. It's on, I believe, all streaming services. They allowed us initial access, pre-release, for their amazing song On and On, which you hear before and through the podcast. If you do get a chance to check them out, Handmade, not the Thai boy band, just check them out. Give them a follow on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you might be able to search and find them. Thanks again to Handmade for an awesome track for us. And if you do get a chance to pause, give us a rating, review, subscribe, that'd be great. And without further ado, let's listen into what Alex has to say about the Calgary art scene.
Stay pretty loose on it. Like I'll do if I'm gonna eat more than just the one meal, I'll do like within an 8-hour window. I try to stick within like a 4-hour window on a good sort of cheat day, I suppose. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll probably just leave this in here as our intro to this episode.
Yeah. Everyone's like, man, I've heard Alex talk about his fucking diet so many times.
That's okay. I haven't. I'm excited about it. All right. Shall we begin? Welcome to Perspectives YYC, my little podcast here where I get to talk to interesting folks in Calgary that I've met. Today, I've got here Alex Kwong. I guess normally what I've been doing is asking people how we've met and just kind of start the story from the beginning. Most of my art journey, 2 years, but this year's been big, 2018. And Alex and I have a kind of romantic meeting. So, yeah, maybe I'll hear it from you, and then I'll correct all the things that you get wrong. So, how are you, Alex? And tell me, how do we know each other?
Man, I guess I was ripping around Thailand for a bit there, and I got a message from you in the middle of the night or the middle of the day, whichever one it was, just about submitting to this large call to artists for a pretty large project. And I was already submitting for that with my other buddy that I often collaborate with, and we corresponded through Instagram DM for that whole day. And I think you pretty much, you just asked me for a few images and stuff, and I said, okay, man, like this is what I can give you in this amount of time from what I have on my email already, and you know, the rest is in your hands. And you put together an amazing pitch that got us shortlisted, which was probably the least amount of work I've ever done to get the most amount of payoff.
Well, maybe in the project itself, but I mean, I'll supplement that part of the story with, I don't know how much of the background for that. It's TELUS. I don't care about naming them. It was for the TELUS new tower. I actually got referred to me by a woman that's essentially like a photography student of mine. And that's a weird thing. She's an incredible woman who, deals with this, that, and the other thing, and needed help learning her camera for her profession. And then she forwarded me this link. But the reason why I DM'd you is I was going to give up on it. I brought the project to some mentors, let's say, and they were like, to do this fine art style, et cetera, it's way above your, ability, grade, price. And then my wife one day was like, well, why do you have to do this by yourself? And this light dinged. And in the fall or something, you and Chris Malloy did a portrait sesh.
Yeah.
And I remember two things. One, that you're a very good looking dude. And two, that you have this cool, you hate calling graffiti, but like large scale art. Mm-hmm. And I DM'd you, not knowing that you were in Thailand. And then, because I think I was already following you on Instagram because of the Chris Malloy thing. And then we built this incredible, oh man, it would have been so cool if we had gotten through with it. The idea for us was I would create a backdrop with some of my imagery, and then Alex was going to either paint his murals on top of it, or then we started thinking about glass panels on top and turning it into a three-dimensional piece. And man, like whether it's DM or when you came back to Calgary, you're an easy guy to deal with.
Yeah, I try to stay pretty easygoing. Try to go with the flow.
Yeah, I mean, we mashed together two fundamentally different approaches to art, I think, over the internet, and we got shortlisted. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they didn't want any of my work. They
said,
yo, David, we love this. We don't like this.
You know what I mean, considering the outcome of that thing, there's a lot more to that story than I think we'll ever know. But, you know, one of the things I want to talk to you about is one of the things that I love about your work is your focus on the human form and the human subject, I suppose, which I was getting strict guidelines, especially after. They're like, no humans, no human forms, no narratives around that. And it's like, you know, fuck, what are we going to do now? But
yeah, it's funny with the human form. Everyone, they look at it as being not as it won't stand for as long or something, right? It'll wear off. People get tired of the face. You know, ask who it is. You know, like that's the main thing. Is everyone's like, hey man, who is this? Why are you even like? Why do they deserve to be painted here? Figure painting is probably one of the longest painting styles in history. Well, I guess abstract stuff isn't that old, but I always think it's cool to just paint people, man. Everybody has a little story that should be celebrated. And if you can find one average person and paint them, and someone goes, man, why'd you paint them? And you look at it, well, there's something to celebrate about them. You live next door to them. Obviously, there's something to celebrate you. It's about like the average person, day-to-day person, Everybody has those hero moments. It becomes a thing where at the outset of submission, people are like, man, we don't want human faces. And then when they see the human face, like, oh man, like that is killer, man. Like we love that. Trying to sell it is a lot tougher, Afterwards, everyone's like, oh man, like it pulls out these emotions, this and that, it reminds me of this and yada, yada, yada. Like, but yeah, it's just a tough sell. And I found Calgary likes more stuff that's universal. I guess when you do a human face, you got to answer to race, gender, all this stuff now these days, right? Nobody can just be like, oh man, like that was cool that person's there. Yeah,
I wonder, I mean, there's a lot of questions I have for you kind of through that, but the one that sticks out right away with your conclusion there is this idea, both of the PC environment we work in, but or sort of a growing extreme PC so-called, but also maybe this idea that should we play into that? Understandably, there are corporate checkbooks, corporate projects, and people that throw a lot of money for public art. And for the scale of work that you do, that's an important world and an important consideration to take. But I wonder as well, like, how much when we become a slave to those kind of notions, this idea that it's through the fear of what they're expecting that I've got to do it this way, that the work becomes, I don't know, less meaningful, less enjoyable. It's hard to find that medium ground between I don't care what anybody thinks, and then I need someone to care because, I'm going to die hungry here. What's your experience? You've been doing this a while, and I got to talk to Kelly from Neverland. I found out you were there a lot longer than I had assumed, pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
day one.
I mean, what's your experience as a big project artist here? I mean, if people don't know, you should check Alex out. I mean, this guy fucking freehand paints portraits of Biggie on walls and just crazy shit like that. But talk to me about what public art is like in Calgary, what you think maybe it could be like. Where's your position on that? What do you feel comfortable talking about today, Alex?
I don't know. I think the public art in Calgary, like there's so many issues with it, just, in terms of the art itself and then the public and like, the response in between. Everyone's waiting for the next public art project so they can shit all over it, right?
Right now, yeah.
You know, and so I don't envy anybody in a public art realm of like trying to choose things or, you know, run a program like that. Sounds like a nightmare to me. Man.
You know what's interesting about public art is so the two main, well, there's three I think that were in the news, but the two big ones that stand out to me is the Ring, that hilarious circle, and whatever the construction waste thing that was built.
Those Beaufort Towers.
But you know what's interesting is I met an artist. She's great. Evelina, but she moved to Toronto, but she had this great perspective. She said, you know, from an engineering perspective, the loop, to think about what it takes actually to design that so that it doesn't blow over in the wind, and how much underneath anchoring has to be additional, like how, you know, there's so much intentionality there. And it changed the context. And now every time I drive by, it still looks ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm thinking, you know, there was something. Maybe the pitch was for that whole bridge to be rings. And then somebody cut the budget and decided they only wanted one, etc. And Beaufort Towers, while it was a construction zone, looked fucking ridiculous. But lately I drove by there and the construction's done and it stands out. And I'm like, you know what? Like whether it connects, you know, to our First Nations, and whether it should have been a Canadian project, all those political questions aside, you know, just as a fundamental piece of art, actually, I bet you, like in 10, 15 years, people are going to be talking about that, you know, constructive way. The context changes a lot of that stuff.
I think with, in terms of the Beaufort Towers, I think it was just the PR was bad on it. I think it's a museum type piece of art that needs a certain setting to be shown. And then when the city sort of wiggled on the delivery of their purpose of it, and, you know, like, well, we consulted these guys and we consulted this, and, like, you know, this is what it is. And then it sort of reminded me of when I was writing a paper in school, and I was like, oh man, like, I got to make some stuff up here. You know, it was like sort of pulling at straws there. So, and I think they're nervous too, right? At that same time, I would probably, I don't know. It's tough, especially after the Blue Ring, right? Like, I would think that after even the best sell for the Blue Ring, I'd maybe be like at some point there'd be a board and someone would go, guys, are we really going to spend $500,000 on a Blue Ring? Out in, like, you know, if that was downtown, it'd be totally cool.
For
but like
sure.
It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Put it downtown. So that's one of my other thoughts with the public art, is that they should have sites that are set aside, like, hey, you know, we can put some art here, we can put some art here, so we don't have to build it all. Like, there's a bridge going on over here. Okay, we have to put some art on it. Obviously, like, you know, make it look nice and stuff. You don't want it to be this, you know, these eyesores everywhere. But if you have somewhere where it's like people can visit this, people can hang out in this park around this art, then that makes it a lot more accessible to the public and enjoyable for them.
I can't remember who I was talking to. It might have been Jill last time, but, you know, this, speaking of development and gentrification, I mean, you know, we're going to talk, I think, about Montreal, your trip there, and your trip all abroad in general. I mean, the painting you did in Thailand, everywhere, you know, you're out there doing stuff. And so you're going to have some experiences with different, presumably different cities' approaches or cultural approaches to this stuff. But with gentrification, in my mind, I brought up, I think, I'm pretty sure on a podcast, but I might have just been talking out of my ass. I'm pretty sure I brought up that my idea of gentrification would be like you're describing, you know, something presumably a little bit more wide in intent. So it's not just about building the most efficient residential thing to fit, you know, 20,000 people in one square block, but that there would be some designated area, whether it be for food, art, for performance, for all of these expressions that I am coming to believe are essential to the idea of being human, spiritually, culturally, etc. But what's happened with what I think is kind of this, as Kyle's been noting, my anti-capitalist stance, but this over-specialization of industry, etc., is that the only way to make, let's say, a developer's company happy is for the extreme profit, you know, is measured on profit margins. And so the idea of designating, you know, this many thousands of square feet for someone to just paint on is not profitable. In a short-term sense, is not profitable for them. It doesn't mean that everybody aspires to that or is stuck in that world, but I think when I look at the gentrification that's happening in Calgary, it feels that way. Like, even if they bring a design element into a condo, they put a couple colored glass pillars or something. It's like it's meant simply to just take up space and hopefully fill vacancy. And I don't know, that stuff bothers me a lot. And I feel like one of the things I want to do with perspective is talking to guys like you, either that have been in the game a while or people that are just starting, is ask the question, how can we change that?
Man, it's a heavy one. I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's talk quickly. You were just in Montreal. What's different there? What makes you feel like they've got something going on that Calgary just doesn't?
It seems like there's just art everywhere. It's pretty well backed industry. And you get that in older cities, right? Calgary's pretty young. It's like a little baby in terms of, Montreal's like 400 some years old or something like that. So, with Calgary, I don't know what it is, like 100 something.
Yeah, someone told me once.
Yeah. So
10, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So it hasn't had all those like turnovers in terms of like, the ups and downs where, some people get crushed and then out of those times of despair, people sort of buckle down, like they start doing these things and then culture is born. I think Calgary it hit with so much money right away. And then it was just like, get people in here to work. So there's just that rat race mindset. But I mean, after the downturn, you can see so many people doing other things. And, I had a lot of friends that were like, man, thank God that happened because that got me out of my job. And now I'm doing what I actually want to do. Broke as hell, but doing what I want to do.
It's like coming from Toronto, I have obviously Toronto snobbery built into my brain. So I have different associations with Montreal, for example, and Vancouver that I've come to challenge and break through my 40 years of being me. And your description of hitting a bottom and having to reassess things and then trying to embrace whatever comes out of it as also, if not a metaphor, then a direct description of what culture maybe is, where it comes from, is a fascinating one. Yeah, I'm under the premise that culture, art, is that expression of the essential human spirit. I mean, that sounds so vague and broad, but at the end of the day, that for me, what I was doing and how I was doing it was making me literally want to kill myself. And I think when push came to shove and my bad days happened and I just fell completely apart, the only way that I could start feeling engaged in life again was either creative or physical things. It started off with hikes and drawing and camera work and coffee, a lot of coffee, and then it became human conversations and meeting with people, discovering that at least for me individually, that being chatty, talking shit, and like being nice to people is something that I'm fundamentally designed to do. Whereas, certainly if the same event happened to someone who's introverted or shy, they would have a different expression. But that creativity, that feeling that we're here to just, I don't know, make something, do something together, seems really important. And we're losing that somewhere. I don't know why. Yeah.
Well, I think creativity used to be just a regular part of life. You'd have to, because you didn't have everything done for you before. You had to wake up in the morning and be like, okay, like, what am I going to eat? Well, I have this and that. So I'm going to be creative in the way I make my meal. Okay, I'm going to be creative in the way that I problem solve all these things that come across in the day because winter's coming and we got to buckle down. And if we don't, we're going to die.
It's here.
God, so like these are all parts of, human life before. And now it's like you can go through your life with no creativity whatsoever. You can be just a consumer, just a passive viewer of life, right? Just things are coming at you and you're just like, yeah, okay. So I think that with no creativity at all, that's why there's such a surge for creativity now. It's like adult coloring books, right? Like, man, whoever thought that would be a thing?
It's huge.
Yeah.
I can't pick one up because I'm too judgmental of myself and the world, but they look hard. I'll give you that.
Like they're definitely complex, man. But I think that's that that thirst for the creativity or just something to like make something and leave something behind,
Sure.
rather than to just consume things all the time, right? In terms of the culture thing, and like this is another thing I've told like numerous people. I was in this class this one time with this guy. Totally didn't think anything of this guy, and he put his hand up one day. in response to like the teacher asking like, what culture means and what culture is. And he hit it bang on. He's like, culture is a group of people's way of dealing with the struggle that is life. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, God damn. Yeah, man. So I've always boiled it right back down to that, because you look across all these cultures in the world, and they have all these, what you might think is bizarre things that they do, but you're like, oh man, like that's what they were dealing with, and that's what they were trying to get by. Once they got past certain things of just like general hunger of living day to day, they had all this extra time to be like, okay, so like, what about this? And like, what, they had all these questions, right? So here we are now with even more questions, I suppose. Anyway.
It's interesting. I had a thought process years and years ago, this idea of white collar, blue collar, and how, like it's since been termed like first world problems. So this, when you have all this time on your hands, when you have all this luxury, all this just time, then you can worry and make a fucking big deal about anything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you got to sweat 10 hours a day just to get food on the table, there's not a lot of consideration until that hits that breaking point. And then we go into these revolutionary reviews of history where finally workers are like, holy shit, man, like, an 18-hour workday, there's a line there. 17, I was okay, but if you took that last hour from me, we're pushing back. But then there's huge cultural revolutions that accompany those big changes too. It's fascinating to think about. Thanks for listening so far. We just wanted to say that this podcast has been brought to you by Media Lab YYC. Kyle Marshall runs this amazing little outfit here in downtown Calgary. And we wanted to say this. Here at Media Lab YYC, we help you share your stories with the public, video, audio, business, personal. Let us help you take your idea to the finish line. I studied philosophy and history, and I have no context of any of this stuff because I wasn't paying attention. But speaking about that, you've brought up some schools. So, I mean, we'll change the tone a little bit and give me an idea of, where do you come from? Like, what not just maybe like, are you Calgarian? I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. Born and raised Calgarian. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I didn't really do much for a while. Obviously started drawing when I was really young. And, you get the teachers saying, oh, you're so talented. Keep that up. And, then they take you aside and like, your math is falling behind pretty hard, get on the math. So I ended up using just art for book covers, the book report covers, posters and all that, group project came in, like I'll do the design part. I got that and you guys do all the research. And then eventually it just became like never really drawing at all, You're going through like your teenage years. You don't know what's cool to draw. Like, oh man, like what do I even want to do? No one around me was really doing any art or anything either. And so I just, put that aside and always thought like, something creative would be a good path for me. So I ended up talking to this career type counselor guy, and we did all these tests and stuff. And one that came up was I'd be good as an architect. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, I'm not doing much else anyway, so like, let's do that. So ended up in university to do undergrad for art history as a pre-architecture thing, and then go on to do a master's in architecture. And went through that, like still like not really paying much attention. And then, like a year or two in, I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, this art history stuff is it's pretty dope. Like, and I was focusing a lot on architecture and stuff. When I finished, I started working my portfolio, went around to all these architecture firms, and I was like, hey, what do you suggest I do? I'm trying to make a go of this. Art history isn't going to do shit for me without architecture. So they said, make sure you do a lot of creative stuff, draw, don't be drawing buildings, sculpt stuff, whatever, like just show that you have a creative mind. So I sat down one day for like, the first day that I was really like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to draw this fucking image. 12 hours went by. I'm like, man, I haven't even eaten yet. And I was hooked from there. I was like, hey, that's the shit. I'm like, art is the shit. I don't really want to go into architecture, all that math, and I don't want to be designing stairwells and shit like that. So I just sort of hit that and just kept running ever since, man. It's just more, bigger, better, type thing.
I love that I'm hearing this rebellion against architecture as the basis of you drawing on buildings. You're like, well, I ain't no architect. Let me show you what I'm going to do with this architecture.
Well, I still love architecture. It's and like Calgary's come a long way in the whole architecture thing. For a while I was like I don't want to be an architect in Calgary.
Yeah,
and that was like another thing sort of pushing me away from that. But yeah, like I still admire architecture wherever I go. It is cool to be able to be a part of the architecture on a pure, plastic element of just, hey, here's an image on the wall of this cool building or something like that,
Well, I'm only hesitating here because I feel like, there's a bias there, this idea that the art is plastic. I mean, certainly from a architectural, structural, and engineering perspective, from a developer perspective, it's like, yeah, it's a cosmetic thing. But I don't know, man. Like when you go buy a building, like right now, you and Alan Bushin, and it's like a couple of big mural painters have tagged the city quite a bit this summer. I don't know if those were city projects or condo projects, but now once in a while you drive through Calgary and an old like 60s building that was designed to look like a fucking military shelter has something on it, and it becomes interesting. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. It's the more we acknowledge that the art brings an intrinsic value, not a monetary one, presume maybe long term people might want to live in a building that has allowed art to be on. I have no idea, how to gauge the social interest, but why call it plastic?
Well, I just call it plastic because I go off the sort of make a joke about it.
Your stuff's good, man. Yeah. Come on, you can value your stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I do. But like in terms of structural, it's not a support beam or anything physically. Maybe culturally or visually for the community. I think you can, like, obviously me doing art history, man, I've written papers and papers and papers out of blue dots and just all that, like digging into all those things. So I can obviously go on for hours and hours about, why this part of the painting means something. And I think that's another thing that's really lost about like where I'm coming from is I'm coming from, like, I studied all this, like I studied, like the Renaissance and like all those artists and like, the cave paintings. So I've like watched, I sort of have like a scope like that. And that's more what I'm looking at rather than, what other people might be looking at in terms of like, oh man, like he's out here doing murals that we'll call it graffiti. But like, I'm not out there doing graffiti. But I guess I'm just coming from an academic point of view in terms of studying through books and all that. And then once I gained all this stuff, all this knowledge from school, now I'm employing it in what I'm doing.
Well, I was going to ask you too, like you have a fascination, at least with the bigger pieces, with sort of a Greco-Roman shapes and, base facial structures, let's call it. I mean, especially with the huge variety that's come out of, let's say, portrait painting alone, whether they're hyper-realistic or cartoonish, whether they represent certain ethnicities, whether they are, made to be silly, I don't know. There's so much going on, but yours stands out often, with the exception of, like hip-hop guts, that, there's, those old sculptural influences. Is that something that you do intentionally? Is there something that's more intuitive about that? Where does that come from?
It's definitely comes from a lot of my favorite artists from, throughout history, but also I found it to be an easy solution to what we were talking about earlier in terms of who's this guy and why does it matter? Who's this girl? Why does it matter? Who's this individual? Whatever. If it's just a statue, then everyone's just like, oh, cool, man. Like, oh, this is the whole story. Like I can look up that story and, I can read it on my own. I don't have to know the person. So that was a convenient sort of roundabout way to circumvent that. And I work in a lot of black and white, so like these marble statues, man, like I can do a lot with that. There's like a certain point where like these things have existed for however many, like hundreds of years, whatever, and you're painting it, like you can have this sort of parallel moment in the universe where you're painting exactly what you're working on an eyelid and they were working on the eyelid. And like, it's sort of cool, like it's like lining up throughout in history, right? It's a cool experience, man. Yeah.
Well, I can't even imagine. I think, with the work that I do, for example, street photography, if I've displayed it in a show, selling street photography to people that has identifiable people in it, you get fascinating conversations. I get accosted on the streets. The other day, I walked by a guy, I was taking a picture, and he told me that he explicitly did not grant me permission to take his, and I was just like, that's not how that works, but, thank you. That idea, which we touched on, you touched on at the beginning, about our hypersensitivity now to our identity, to this idea of being stolen to us. I think in maybe the first one, I was hearkening back to the old stories of these African tribes that wouldn't allow people to take pictures because it felt like they were stealing their soul. Mm-hmm. We're doing this loop where, and maybe for good, I don't know, all of this paranoia about, let's say, Google and Facebook analytics and, NSA and, all of these big marquee item news stories about what they're doing with all of our information. I got to the point personally where I was like, I just don't care anymore. Like, whatever they're doing to abuse me, like I'm getting attacked by robocalls, 10 a day, telling me that I'm going to be sued by the Canadian government if I don't pay them money, all that kind of fun stuff. So I just ignore it, because once I start acting into it, then I feel like I become very isolated and angry. But it's harder when you're talking to the public as an artist and you need to connect to somebody. I mean, your pencil work is incredible. Whatever you want to call it, graphite stuff. I mean, you can do some photorealistic stuff. Like, where do you find that conversation with your clients and people tending? Is it different? It must be different with big corporations, with individuals.
Like, so how do you mean, like, in terms of?
Like, let's say, I mean, I don't know with your graphite and your pencil work if you sell those or if those are mostly just that's just what you need to do because you're an artist. But if you're selling something like that and you've created like a photorealistic image of like a homeless person or a dog. Or something. I mean, that's a different conversation than arguing with somebody that a Greco-Roman, statue is more anonymous and therefore more acceptable in public space. I mean, what are there sort of any kind of interesting insights you have with people that you've been dealing with, clients? And
I think there's been a couple times where I've just messaged someone and said, hey, can I use your image to draw it? Or if I just snag it from somewhere, like I'll give like the photographer credit. Like Lee Jeffries has some amazing images to sketch from, like of just, random homeless people, and, really puts that human pain to the forefront of like addiction and homelessness and stuff like that. So, but for the most part, I'm not really selling many of those sketches. I'll just try to keep them going. Like I have them all in a sketchbook. So I like to fill one up and get on to the next one. Usually carry two in my pocket, one where it's just like my ramblings of, half-baked ideas and late night thoughts. And then the other one is just all like full book sketches. So I've had people that go, hey man, like I really want to buy that one. And I'm like, okay, well, I can do it in another book for you. I'm not going to sell you. I'm going to sell you 25 sketches.
You'll reproduce something?
Yeah, I'll just sketch it again. Lately, I've been doing a lot of these moleskin sketches where, someone says, "Hey, man, can you do a portrait of this person, my dog, or like my aunt, my uncle, kid, whatever." And doing the moleskin stuff. I'm on the go a lot lately, so just having that in my back pocket, and like anytime I get to sit down, waiting like 20 minutes for, someone to show up or like a coffee or whatever, put some time in on it. But ultimately, I'm not profiting too much off those anymore. I used to sell them. I used to, do like all the celebrity stuff. But a lot of that was like honing technique.
I'm just thinking about, with these sketchbooks and all of this stuff, it's a fascinating, like I used to think I could draw when I was a kid. And, how much could you talk about, different types of lead and graphite and...
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
hey man,
different types of paper.
Yeah.
How involved are you in that sort of stuff?
My favorite pencil is a Bic, like just like the Bic 0.7, man. Like just that one. Like you do a lot with that. Mechanical pencil. I've gone and bought the other, like the specialty ones and charcoal and all that. But man, with the Bic 0.7, man, you pretty much do whatever. You can recreate any photograph. You can do whatever. You can get it sharp. You can get it like a nice slow blend and stuff. That's the one, man. I find, you're saying like, oh, like drawing stuff, like, like it sucked, man. Man, I sucked before. Like I sucked. And I remember when I first started drawing and stuff and doing the thing for my portfolio, like they were okay. They were okay, but like, that was, you're getting one out of, 50. So I brought him to this Calgary artist and I was like, yeah, man, like, what do you think? Like, this is what I've been doing. And I remember he was like, yeah, cool, man. Yeah. Like, have fun, keep at it. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I was so embarrassed. I was like, okay, I'm never going to allow someone's manners to be a response. Like, I'm never going to let someone just choose manners to respond to my art. I'm going to make sure that my skill is at such a level that it's not ignorable. You at least have to go, man, that is pretty good. Like, I don't like it maybe, but there's some shit there, right? So I went home that day and I was just like, man, I was just stirring, man. I was like, fuck. So I went through on Instagram. Like, this is like way back when Instagram was still fair, I suppose.
We won't start on algorithms. Me and algorithms don't get along.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
So yeah, it was all a fair shot, but so you could really tailor your Instagram feed to like what you wanted, right? So I unfollowed every single person. Like, I used to follow everybody because I used to think, okay, there's something to learn from everybody. Like, so many pencil artists, and being just like one-on-ones, like teaching yourself, pencil's the easiest thing. Pencil, charcoal, because you either have a shade value or you don't. And it's just like different levels, right? You're like, okay, we're going like full black there, or we're going like full white, and like everything in between. I unfollowed all those guys, every single person, except for all the people that I wanted to be able to paint and draw like. And I was like, you know what? That guy drew this photo. I'm going to draw that photo. That guy drew this. I'm going to draw that. And I'm going to figure out how it all works, right? So doing that, once you figure out how the pencil works, figure out all these things, you can then look at what I started to do then was I'd look at the people that I admired, I'd look at their drawings, and I'd look for the tell of where, okay, like I see like where like maybe it was a mistake or like, oh, I can see where this changed from a like hyper photo real to like a sketch or something like that. So like I'm like studying all this stuff off like a 3-inch screen. You break down like your whole perception of like what you think all these things are, right? And you just go, okay, I'm going to there's a line here, I'm going to put that line there. There's whatever shape this is, I'm going to put that there. And you're not drawing an eye anymore. You're just drawing that shade in that centimeter square. When you're doing that, and like you just keep building out. Then you realize you're like, oh man, like this whole thing is really not about drawing. It's more about observing. And then that leaks into the rest of your life. And like, like the whole thing is like a crazy thing you can extrapolate and, apply to every aspect of your life.
It's crazy listening to how driven you are in this process. I wonder if I might ask, through the tumultuous years of your teenage thing where you were essentially a consumer, and then you get into university and you feel lost. Then you have this moment where something clicks. I mean, was there something that kind of drove you to push this hard into art, to search to define yourself in such a way that, something like this, the idea of, for example, not just culling in Instagram relationships, but aspiring to something, practicing, training, having that sense of self, which is both, like all art, is self-deprecating, but also egoist, because, we have to also believe that we have the capability of doing something to pursue it. But then we also have to hate everything we do. Otherwise we wouldn't keep doing it over and over again. Yeah. Like, is that something you think that's just been part of you, or did something happen around that time? Because it's a fascinating change of pace, man.
Nothing I did prior to that, like I never took any initiative, like period. Like I'd get the job at, wherever, and I do exactly what they told me to do and a little bit less, right? And like this is all pure. Now this is all run off pure initiative. But I think what it was once it clicked, and once I sat down for that first day of drawing and didn't eat, didn't whatever. When I was a kid, I got diagnosed with ADD, and if I'm sitting there 10 hours drawing, man, like, I don't know if I can really say I have ADD, even though some people say, well, man, like like one of the side effects of having ADD is that you're hyper focused. I'm like, well, that sounds like some bullshit to me. Like,
It's
you
the
know,
opposite.
like part of being a midget is being fucking super tall. You know, like sometimes that's a side effect. Yeah. So like my thing was that like once I did sit down and start doing that, I hit a vein and I was like, I'm running with it, you know, and everything sort of clicked. And I was like, I know what to do. And, you know, that's the first time where I felt like, okay, I'm in the
zone?
just in the groove or some shit. I don't know. But yeah, so and then I realized I'm like, okay, I've wasted a lot of time. So that was one. I'm like, I gotta do this. Since, you know, so I ended up developing like insomnia. I was up like all hours of the day, like just like drawing. And then you know, so that like really pushed it. And then after that, it was, now it's like I just want to make sure that I can always paint better and I'm holding my own, and that at any point in time, if I'm like, I need to create something now, boom, like I know exactly how to do it. So it's just always, it's like elevating your game, right? I never want anyone to ever be able to say to me like, oh, well, man, like you're shit. Like, yeah, like you might have done this, but, you know, used a shortcut or like whatever. I'm like, ah, man, like I'll do something right now with fucking ketchup on the table or something, you know, and make it dope as hell. So that's sort of my thing, is I would say it's powered by, yeah, that egomania, self-hatred, and insecurity.
Well, you're an artist. Yeah, man. I don't know. It's the more people I meet and the more stories, and the stories are both different and the same. The one fundamental thing for all artists is this drive to keep doing it over and over again. And I'm sure that will extend to the corporate people that I often hate on, and all these, you know, other human beings that find their road somewhere else that I just can't comprehend. But there's some people that are, wholesomely obsessed with making money. I don't know who they are, but I'm sure that they exist. And I think, I think it's fascinating hearing that from you when we hit that point, and, you know, the idea of you sitting up all night staring at Instagram feeds and going, oh, no, yes, no, I got to do this. It's fascinating. I'm developing that with photography right now where, I find myself evaluating things, not so much in a love-hate, but yeah, you can see things, you know, because I've tried it.
Yeah. Well, you're at work, right? Like you're looking at them and you're breaking them down the way you break down your own images. And that's the way I look at paintings, which, you know, sometimes isn't the best way to do it, but I'm usually looking at something. I'm like, all right, man, like how did this get put together? And I'm breaking it down one by one. It would be nice to just enjoy paintings. Like I do, but you know, I'm also looking like, you know, someone across the street is going, oh wow, look at that mural, and I'm like walking up and I'm like, oh, okay, all right,
These
I see where
errors.
the paint overlaid, or like something like that, right?
Yeah. This white is off. This,
yeah.
Wow, we don't have a lot of time, so we got to wrap up. But that's a whole other podcast, being hypercritical about every goddamn thing. So I got the signal. We got to wrap. I have a lot. You got to come back so we can talk about more stuff. But what's up with you? Are you plugging anything? What's going on with you right now?
Man, I don't know. Just doing my thing. I don't know.
You said that to me like in April, and then on your Instagram, you're like flying around different places in the country and painting barns, and you're in Montreal. I think you went to like, I can't remember. You've been.
Yeah, I was down in Colorado. Out in, where else was I? Like, in the past month. Yeah, I was down in Colorado, like big project back in Calgary, and went off to Montreal. My girl surprised me with a trip to Montreal, which was super dope for my 30th birthday. So I thought I was going to Winnipeg. She hit me up and she was like, hey,
that's wicked.
Like, what are you doing at the end of September? And I was like, I think I could be free, you know, knowing that's like, it's my birthday. And she's like, okay, cool. We're going to Winnipeg. We have a wedding and a family reunion. I'm like, oh, fuck.
That's awesome.
So like for a month and a half, I thought I was going to Winnipeg. And then like 2 days before, like the day before, you know, she gave me a card and she's like, we're going to Montreal. So like that was super cool to just, you know, have a big month of painting and then finish it just hanging out in Montreal and like watching, you know, looking at even doper art, being like, oh shit, man, like I got a lot of work to do.
Well, we could maybe have a lot of work to do here. No, we won't try to convince you to stay, Alex.
Man, I take it day by day.
Yeah, if I ever get to meet your girl, I'm going to give her a high five. That's a pretty slick birthday surprise.
It was one of the best. It was one for the books, so, you know, and the 30th, so it was good.
How do we find you?
What
do you prefer?
Alex Kwong on Instagram. That's mostly where I do all my stuff.
Hopefully we'll get another chance to put. So we've been talking about collabing all year. Well, sort of until you went off on your trips. But I still think that we have something to build together.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I haven't figured out what that is yet. Even our original project somehow.
Yeah.
And then the age-old question: who's going to fund something that big? But we'll figure that out. We'll keep asking Kyle for freebies. You know, we'll do it through Media Lab. How does that sound, Kyle? Got a pained shrug. It's like just quit talking. Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
We'll have you back hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll chat about some other things.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
I think that your heart is right. I think